We wanted to be seen as compassionate, and the world said, unless you do XYZ, you're not compassionate. You're hard-hearted and calloused. And so because Christians didn't want to be accused of all those sort of nasty words, we were willing to bend on a whole host of issues, to mute our witness when it came to sexual ethics, to draw back from certain discussions, whether it's on immigration or whether it's on abortion.
Hello, my name is Anne McElhenney.
And I'm Phelim McAleer.
Welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop from the Emerald Isle.
From the Emerald Isle, yes. I'm looking at a rainy Emerald Isle.
Very, very rainy Emerald Isle, although we have had some very pleasant weather. It has to be said, you know. But I would say consistency is something that you can't get in Irish weather.
Yes. We just had the Open Golf, actually.
Yes, an American one.
Yes, indeed. Northern Ireland. Anyway, enough of the sport. That's the sports section.
That's the whole of the sports section over for now, yeah.
Yes, so we're in the Emerald Isle, and what's on today's show? Ireland is not. Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. No way. How.
The most anti-Semitic country in Europe. No way.
Absolutely
no
not.
Way.
No,
I would be shocked.
Shocked, I tell you.
To find anti-Semitism going on in this country. So we bring you the latest non-anti-Semitic hate crime in Ireland. And as anti-Semitism runs riot all over the Emerald Isle, what does the Parliament decide to focus on, Anne? Tell us.
One country in the whole world that they choose to find fault with.
Yes.
In the whole world, there's only one country doing anything wrong.
They try to get
according to the Irish government.
They're trying to get a law passed that singles out Jews for economic boycott in Europe. This is the first time Jews will be the victims of an economic boycott since a certain other party
was in power. Would that be the Nazis then?
That would be the Nazis, yes.
Isn't that lovely?
Ireland is always a historic.
We're always way ahead of the rest, aren't we?
Yes, we're right there. Also on the programme, we interview Dr. Joe Rigney about his latest book, The Sin of Empathy. And it's a very interesting title, very provocative title.
Yes.
But as we'll discuss, I think empathy is behind so much of what's wrong with this world, which is a very counterintuitive idea, but that we will be discussing in detail. And Abuela Smollett. Yes.
Oh, Smollett film. Yeah. Brings me right back.
Jussie Smollett.
Jussie Smollett film. One of Phelim's favourites.
Yes. How one enterprising grandmother used liberal hysteria over immigration raids to make herself a nice little fraudulent earner. You know, you have to admire the entrepreneurship of some people.
Indeed.
Yes. And a feature that I have been noticing recently, and Anne McElhenney does not know what this is. It's going to be a little surprise for her later in the show.
Fabulous.
How the leftist media have been using the problem/advice pages of newspapers to push a leftist agenda. They never sleep. They use every means necessary, and we shouldn't too. And we'll show you just how they will shoehorn issues into places where they shouldn't belong.
And we had an amazing response to last week's podcast on the trans issue and the Federal Trade Commission's workshop. Extraordinary response. I'm extraordinary. We'll bring you comments that you've sent in to that we're so grateful that you talked about. So we'll bring you those.
Yeah. So on to today's show. Yes, Ireland is at great pains, Anne McElhenney, to point out that they are not an anti-Semitic country. So what did the Parliament devote its resources to? It devoted its resources to trying to pass legislation to single out boycotting goods and services or goods from the Israeli-occupied territories, and they're doing a little postcode slicing to make sure it's Jewish goods from the Israeli-occupied territories, which is Israel, basically. The only country in the world that has chosen to do this too, but no, it's not anti-Semitic.
Well, it must be marvellous though, because it basically means, and Ireland is obviously extremely clever, very interesting, brilliant politicians, that there's no kind of injustice. There's nothing really going wrong anywhere else in the world.
Well, let's come back to that, but I want to show you what it's like on the street in this anti-Semitic country. Let's play the video from last Friday on a Dublin bus.
What are you doing? Well, we have to point out what they do.
You're better. Are you not better than this? Are we not better than this?
No.
We are better than this.
No, you're not.
Yes, we are.
No,
no, you're not.
No, we're not.
Yes, we are.
I agree with him with this one.
They're the genocidal Jews.
I agree with him with this one.
Jews are murdering. They are murdering They're the genocidal Jews. They're the genocidal
Is he being
Jews.
hateful right now, or are you being hateful right now?
No, I'm being hateful.
Well, it doesn't matter who is committing genocide.
Is he? Is he?
I just ask you to pay your
Well,
bill.
he is standing up for genocide.
Is he? Did you
Yes.
ask him? Did you ask him?
Yeah,
Is he
well,
just
he's
living-
definitely genocide.
Is he just living on a
Look
Dublin
at the
bus?
white woman standing up for genocide.
there we go.
Look at
There
this
we
woman
go.
standing up for genocide.
Okay, that's me, yeah.
Look at the woman
Genocide
standing
for
up for genocide.
What, is this your stuff?
Well, who is committing genocide? Who is committing genocide?
Who's being hateful?
Am I
Are you being hateful? Yes, you are. You're the only person being
who
hateful.
is
on this
committing
bus, right?
genocide?
I kind of picked it
Who
up,
is
but I
committing
didn't.
genocide? Are the Palestinians committing
Yeah, let's have a
genocide?
debate on the bus.
Are Palestinians committing genocide?
Yeah, they're all like this.
Are the Palestinians committing genocide?
I get used to it.
Look
They're all
at
like
this
this.
white woman, white knighting for the Jew, white knighting for the Jew. The Jew is taking it. Is taking it. Look,
Stop it!
look at it.
Stop!
The
Do you want to sit
the
down?
white
Stop
woman.
it.
I'm not.
I just want to say one thing about that video. The lady on the bus, I think we all would like to think that we would be that lady on the bus if we were faced with such a similar situation. What a horrible, extraordinary situation. There has been so far, it has not been reported. This has not been reported, I don't believe, in the media in Ireland.
Yeah, well, and many of the events,
And
we're
it's
gonna
not,
talk-
yeah, it's not isolated, right?
Yeah. But one thing struck me now, it's not clear, but I think there's the lady who's trying to defend the Jewish guy, and she's saying, we're better than this, we're better than this. And I believe the Jewish guy is saying, you're not.
Oh, yeah.
You're not,
Yeah.
you're not. And he's kind of going, it's good to see it out in the open. As somebody said, the guy was so drunk he forgot to say genocidal Zionists. He actually just went straight for the genocidal Jew. So,
But that's not an isolated incident.
No,
We also had the incident of Jamie O'Mahony, the DCU student, young student, who just was attending a speech in Limerick. We featured that recently in one of our podcasts. Let's just watch that.
Yeah.
Exactly what happened to this student. And by the way, the man who is assaulting him is a professor from a university.
yes.
Why have you, over the years, used the benefits of like free speech, freedom to criticise, etc., in order to demonise and delegitimise and ultimately bring about the destruction? The only country in the Middle East where you could get away with that, and any other country in the Middle East, you would have presumably died in a dungeon by now, like we see in Syria or Saudi or elsewhere. Now, I know that you, as someone who has,
just want to say it's a question, not a speech.
as someone who has represented Hijacked on the communist side, you also hate Israel because it's a capitalist success story. And it's very prosperous, and it's a fantastic place with the quality of life. I'm coming to the question. Okay.
We have 5 minutes.
Yeah. But thankfully, Israel will exist, prosperous and free, long after we are gone. Long after we are gone. And I want to ask, who all you like? I'm afraid of time. Don't you do it to me, son. Don't you touch me, kid. Don't you touch me, man. Don't you touch me, sir. I know you. I do know you, sir. I'm Jamie. I'm not touching you. I'm not touching you. Let go of my flag, son. I have free speech here.
I'm not doing anything. Don't touch me. Don't touch me. Out. Don't touch me. What are you touching me for? I didn't do anything. Out. What are you doing? Where's my friend? What are you doing?
Your friend caused his own problems.
Sorry? Okay.
It's over for you.
Can he come out?
It's over for you.
I'm not
He
doing
can.
anything.
He certainly can come out.
Isaac, grab your bag. Isaac, grab your bag.
Take that down.
There you go. And then we had the Jew hunting in Dunleary and Spitting. Let's watch that video.
My better side. You can take a video all you want. You're not welcome in Ireland.
Zionists are not welcome in Ireland.
Yes, Israel is on its way out. Believe me, Israel is on its way out. And you're not.
It's really American empire is crumbling.
I love you too. I hope. Did you just spit on me?
I did.
Okay.
And I actually did not miss.
Can you call the police, please? Thank you. Thank you.
Because this was an attack.
Yeah, like I got spit on.
Oh, I wish I kept recording this. Oh no, an attack.
Why do you keep recording me, this lady? Like you can be very quiet.
Free concept.
And that's that is incredibly distressing. I just think that that's super disturbing. There's something, it's on another level actually, because it's women and they've hunted these guys down. They've obviously were given information about where these Israeli men were staying in this hotel. They knew all about them. They knew all about their movements. And I don't know what consequences they've faced for that. But, so this is, and then if that's not enough, if that isn't enough for you, the whole, the government of Ireland decided to take on the Eurovision Song Contest and decided that they wanted to get Israel thrown out of the Eurovision Song Contest.
And it goes from the ridiculous to the sublime. There's a flag on a pub in Donegal banning Zionists. We all know what that means. My favourite one is where a year or two ago they banned the 4th of July celebrations in a tourist town that's heavily dependent on American dollars. And they banned the 4th of July celebrations because somehow America is somehow supporting Israel, so therefore we have to ban everything. You have to think there's more to this than concern for the people of Gaza. I think the oldest hatred is strong and lives among us. And as we were saying, the mainstream media have not reported on the fact that a student was assaulted by a professor or there was an anti-Semitic assault on the bus. Now, if this was an immigrant being attacked or a black person being attacked or a brown person being attacked,
we'd have all heard about it over and over again.
Well, it would be all our fault, toxic masculinity.
And then to make matters even worse, this bill that they're trying to pass in the Irish Parliament, which basically the actual bill will be called the Prohibition of Importation of Goods, otherwise known by the acronym PIGS.
Yes.
Which is, it's hard to believe that that's an accident. It's actually a little bit hard to believe that's an accident, that there isn't any sensitivity, that nobody didn't spot that and say, well, we can't have that. That looks really bad. But the hearing, I mean, you kind of said earlier, huge vast resources were put into this hearing. Huge vast resources are being spent on pushing this piece of legislation while Ireland is basically going down the tubes, where the economy is in a very bad way, where there isn't accommodation for young people who come out of university. They can't find anywhere to live. They get a job in Dublin, but they've nowhere to live.
Yeah.
So
or
it's
they
not
pay,
like...
Or they pay 50% of their
income on
rent.
On rent.
So they're all emigrating. So Ireland's young people are emigrating to Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Dubai, and they're concerned about... And where do you hear how few goods are imported from these occupied territories? So they, as part of their, I suppose, consultation, they have to go out and bring in,
Oh God, they have to talk to Jews, Phelim, do they? Did they have to talk to Jews?
I know.
To try and get this, to make them look like impartial.
So this is a committee hearing, the Foreign Affairs and Trade Committee. They amalgamated the committee just for this. The first person to speak was Alan Shatter, who we've had on the show.
Yeah, but Alan Shatter, so he was a former minister in a previous government. He's been an MP, what they call a TD here, but he's been a member of Parliament for years and years. He's now no longer in Parliament. He's a writer. He's a lawyer.
He was the Minister for Justice. He was the Minister for Defence. He basically, he's been in Irish politics for decades. He's a well-known, familiar face. He described it as a sectarian bill that was attacking over Israel over a trade that was absolutely minuscule.
You won't believe how minuscule this is, and the implications of it are extraordinary. So let's listen to Alan Shatter explain what this bill entails.
Yes.
The bill is essentially a sectarian measure based on falsehoods, riddled with obscurity and anomalies, detached from historical, religious and present-day reality, and abandons all lessons learned in our own peace process. The goods targeted are deemed by the preamble to be maintaining what it obscurely and wrongly describes as the illegal situation created by Israel in the occupied Palestinian territory. Even if the illegal situation depiction is accepted as accurate, as it is now known that the total value of commercial goods so imported in the 5-year period 2020 to 2024 came to €685,000.
So 685,000
over 4 years, right?
5 years.
Over 5 years, 685,000 over 5 years.
Well, actually, funny. He says in the 5-year period from the 2020 to 2024, but I think when you add the so 5 years. Well, we'll believe him.
But he goes on. But he goes on after that to talk about the motivation for the bill and just how historic it is.
Can I just say
not in a good way? That It's the first bill, actually, to boycott the Jews since the Nazis. He goes on to explain that.
Can I just say, the importation of goods may be minuscule at the moment, but if the law comes in, there will be a massive increase in importing of some goods, because I will be bringing the goods in through Belfast and selling them in the Republic of Ireland. And I'll start a brand called Illegal Avocados and Illegal Olives. And I don't even like olives. I'm not even that fond of avocados.
No, it's true.
Let's get back to the serious matter, although it will be pretty serious, because you can be arrested for selling these goods, and try that. So Alan Shatter, he, as you say, and he talks about the motivation of the bill. It's a historic bill, not in a good way. Let's hear just how historic it is.
Israeli settlements referenced in the bill, from which imported goods are to be prohibited, are an intended legal euphemism for locations in which Jews are present, reside or work on the West Bank, Gaza and East Jerusalem. The symbolism is to publicise the Irish government's disapproval of any Jews doing so, to demonise Israel, and to portray Ireland as advocating that occasions be Judenrein, a policy which reflects that attempted in the last century in Europe by Nazi Germany. It is a denial of 3,000 years of history, Jewish, Christian and Muslim theology, credible attempts to permanently end Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and present-day reality on the ground. In essence, the bill is the first initiative of any European government to enact legislation to intentionally boycott and discriminate against Jews since the defeat of Nazi Germany in 1945. This anti-Semitic symbolism is reinforced by the absence from the bill of any prohibition on the importation of goods originating from any other occupied territory.
Yeah, so the symbolism, is not lost on anyone with a brain, And one of the things that struck me that I thought we should talk a little bit about was this issue of, illegally occupied lands. We don't have to go very far from where we're sitting right now, Phelim, to the part of Ireland called Northern Ireland, which is not part of Ireland, which is legally part of the United Kingdom, which I think an enormous number of people in Ireland would think was illegally occupied. And I was thinking, before they go and bother with, Israel at all, why wouldn't they start there? Why wouldn't they target Protestants, by the way, in Northern Ireland, and target Protestant goods that are made in Northern Ireland? If that's what you're up to, if this is what your deal is about illegally occupied lands.
When I was growing up, Northern Ireland was, Northern nationalists described Northern Ireland as an illegitimate statelet. And they would call it the North, we never even said the words Northern Ireland. That was a huge thing. We did not recognize, Northern nationalists, Northern Republicans did not recognize that it was viewed as an illegal statelet. In fact, where we're sitting, the Irish Republic had it in Articles 2 and 3, the second and third articles of the Irish Constitution, were that Northern Ireland was illegal, and that the overwhelming idea of the Irish Republic was reunification. That was the number one principle. There was almost the number one.
That's gone now.
That's gone. But if you wanted to take, and there are other examples too.
There's loads of examples. I mean, what about America? So the Native American population in America never invited anyone in that arrived in ships and whatever. And so the whole of America basically is illegally, what do we call it? Occupied, is an illegally occupied territory.
Under their definition.
If that's the definition you're working on, yeah, that's right. And that's why during this hearing, they basically said, look, we're not even going to get into the idea of the description of the illegally occupied territories, because that's actually a whole argument.
Well, why aren't they boycotting Turkey? Because Turkey illegally occupies northern Cyprus.
Mm-hmm. And that's not the only place, right?
No.
What about Crimea?
What about Tibet? Oh, let's take on China.
Let's definitely take on China. I think that's what Ireland should do. They should definitely take on China.
Would you argue that Britain illegally occupies the Falklands/Malvinas Islands?
Well, I don't think that they're very adjacent landmass-wise, are they?
No, I don't think. I think that could be the definition.
A little bit of an issue there, all right.
Yes. So how far are we going? So
So in terms of colonialism, the only thing that really matters, if they're going for that whole colonial thing, they seem to have forgotten, like they've forgotten about Northern Ireland. Why wouldn't they start there? Why wouldn't they start with Northern Ireland? But instead of that, there's one country. There's always just this one country, and I love what people say about this, and it's so funny. If you look at the map, and we'll put up a map here just now, and to see how much of this area has been occupied by owned by the Arabs, and Israel is this tiny statelet, and only until I went there I didn't realize quite how small it was.
Mm-hmm.
It's a minuscule. It would fit into Ireland, I think, 4 times. Like, it's minuscule. Israel is minuscule. It's the only Jewish state on the planet Earth. It's so small that the word Israel can't fit on the map.
Oh yeah,
you have to push it out into the middle of the Mediterranean Sea, because you can't actually, because it won't fit. And it wouldn't even fit if you wrote it downwards on the map.
Yeah. No, you can go the length of Israel in less than a day, and the width.
So one of the other witnesses that spoke at this hearing was Maurice Cohen, who's the chair of the Jewish Federation. We've met Maurice many times.
Yes.
And he talked about just how performative this whole nonsense and madness was.
Yes, Maurice, he said, and this is a quote from earlier in the speech, it will not foster dialogue between Israelis and Palestinians, nor will it improve the lot of Palestinians socially or economically. It certainly will not bring peace any sooner. But then he got to really the important part, how it felt to be a Jew in Ireland now. He made a connection between a rise in racism and a rise in anti-Semitism in Europe, which I think is mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say, I suppose what he's talking about there is the anti-immigrant protests in Europe and the rise in anti-Semitism. Those are 2 different people. Those are 2 different groups of people, and this is something that many people cannot accept, even when they're being punched in the face by it. That anti-Semitism is a creature mostly of the left. Now, the European left, the American left. There are the oddballs, literally, on the right, but mostly it's a hobby, a long-held hobby of the left. So, also, I should say, in this witness testimony, he talks about the Easter Rising, which is really the foundational rebellion of the independence movement in Ireland. It's kind of Ireland's Gettysburg, only much more important and significant. And that's just for your context there when you hear him talking about the Easter
But I
Rising.
think the thing that I love about this particular part where Maurice is speaking here is what he says about the friend that spoke to him recently.
Yeah.
And we have met Maurice, and Maurice has talked about the minuscule population of Jews in Ireland. I think it's 2,400, and how they feel.
Yes.
Frightened, by the way, and terrified because they don't know what's going to happen next. And when you look back at that video that we showed earlier of the Jewish man on the bus or the Jewish men that were in the hotel in Dunleary, you can see why, if you were a Jew in Ireland, you'd be, you would be incredibly vigilant and incredibly scared all the time about what might happen to you next. Let's play this clip.
Yeah.
I speak as an Irish citizen born and raised here in Dublin, and as a Jew from a small, long-established Irish Jewish community that arrived here in the early 1600s. And that community is now increasingly fearful. We are witnessing a rise in racism and its not too distant relative anti-Semitism across Europe. Yes, but also right here in Ireland. And while this bill may not set out to target Jews or Jewish life, its message is unmistakably felt by us. One of my best friends, with whom I went to school, a long-time respected member of the Jewish community, whose grandfather was the only citizen murdered in the 1916 Rising, said to me only 2 days ago, "I always thought of myself as an Irishman who happened to be Jewish. Now, I know I'm just a Jew living in Ireland." Many of us think like that, because when the only country in the world you choose to boycott by law is the one Jewish state, not China for Tibet, not Turkey for Northern Cyprus, not Russia for Crimea, or Myanmar for its atrocities, then something is amiss. Selective outrage is not foreign policy, and double standards do not serve the cause of peace. This bill, in tone and in consequence, isolates moderates, empowers extremes, and undermines the credibility that Ireland has built as a voice for reason and reconciliation in the field of peace building.
Again, I don't agree that the rise in anti-racism, as he calls it, and anti-Semitism are in any way connected. In fact, they're the polar opposites.
So he said that the bill basically was not about ending conflict, but about Irish elites feeling good about themselves.
Let's hear that.
Let's have a listen to that.
This is not diplomacy. This is not a strategy. It's performance politics dressed as principle. And in that theatre, we're not helping Palestinians, we're just congratulating ourselves. This bill may feel good, but does it do good? Because it won't bring two states closer. But it might drive Jewish communities here in Ireland further into fear and isolation. Let me be very clear, criticism of Israel is not anti-Semitism. But when criticism becomes a campaign, when it becomes law, and no other state is treated the same, we have to pause and we have to question.
Then Natasha Hausdorff spoke. She's
wonderful.
She was wonderful.
Yes,
she was,
British ambassador. Sorry, she's a British barrister and an international law expert.
Yes.
Really wonderful and obviously very, very informed about what this could mean.
She warned that this symbolic law could have real world consequences for an Irish economy, overly dependent. I think 25%.
I'm gonna have the numbers. I'm gonna give you the numbers on that after she speaks. But let's listen to what she says first.
Yeah, an Irish economy overly dependent on American multinationals, and it could force American companies in Ireland to leave, because by staying and following the boycott law, they could be breaking American law. So let's hear what she says.
These measures would necessarily, in the bill, create a government-required partial boycott of Israel. Now, that would force American companies based in these countries, so based in Ireland, to violate federal anti-boycott laws. The background to this is that since 1977, with broad bipartisan support, federal law has banned American companies from, and I quote, complying with, furthering or supporting any boycott fostered or imposed by a foreign country against a country which it does not itself which is, forgive me, is not itself the object of any form of boycott. And that's 50 USC paragraph 4841. Now, those laws apply even to US companies doing business abroad. And of course, there are many large companies doing business in Ireland for tax reasons. As advised, I shan't name any names. But the issue here, of course, is that even if one of these companies were to represent to Irish authorities that it was complying with this proposed legislation, it would necessarily fall foul of those boycott provisions and the penalties associated with them I have already outlined. That is the severe danger that Ireland is courting, in my respectful submission.
So, I mean, you just on that, I mean, it is extraordinary.
Yes.
The level to which the Irish economy is dependent on America. So 75% of Ireland's corporate tax revenue comes from American companies. That's from the Financial Times and from the Wall Street Journal. In 2024, corporate taxation made up 29% of all of the tax receipts received in Ireland. This is
let me just
huge. And I want to make another point about this because it's kind of incredible. In the middle of all of this and everything that we have said about anti-Semitism in Ireland and all of that, the only thing that's giving the Irish public pause in relation to this pigs legislation, the only thing is the money. That's how principled we are, by the way.
Yes, and funny, there was a poll out last week where they're kind of getting a bit squeamish about it, you know.
But it just shows you, by the way, you know, obviously we think it's a complete disaster for every possible reason, and it's particularly because it's anti-Semitic. But it's so interesting. The only thing that's going to stop the Irish public passing this piece of legislation is the fact that the economy will crumble, because American companies cannot trade legally, cannot trade in a country that has decided to boycott another country that America has no issues with.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah. And, you know, obviously these things are open to interpretation and all that, but it could be quite the legal case when it hits the courts. So Hausdorff also warned that the proposed legislation, this is quite funny, puts Ireland in a position where it'll be breaching European Union law.
Yes.
Because the European Union, because Ireland...
The whole idea, by the way, of the European Union, we were always told when we were being urged to join the European Union, was that it was all about money.
Yes.
It is all about trade.
Yeah. So the European Union says we, as a whole, decide trade.
Yeah,
no country can have a one-off deal with the States or a one-off deal with China or anything like that. We're all a block.
By the way, and Ireland has loved being part of the
That's
European
right.
Union.
Oh,
like,
no,
they
no.
just love it. Like, they couldn't love it more. And Irish people love saying that they're Europeans. They
That's
just
it.
love that.
I find
But
myself more
then
European than I was.
suddenly, on this particular, and this is why, you know, this idea that we're not anti-Semitic is ridiculous. On this one thing, they're willing to risk everything.
Yes.
And they're willing to risk this lovely, yummy relationship they have with the European Union.
That's a very good point. They're willing to risk everything. It's quite, you know, it's like, you know, Hitler was really willing to risk everything to exterminate the Jews. When you think about it, you know,
I know it's absolutely amazing, and I think it is worth possibly saying, and I think maybe we should say this: there hasn't been a vote on this. This isn't all Irish people. In fact, actually, we shouldn't characterise the whole of Ireland being like that. Ireland's elites are like that. You know, the vast majority of Irish elites are like that. The vast majority of Irish politicians are like that. But they are not representing the population, which is kind of bizarre, by the way. And I wanted to mention another thing about PIGS because it's really interesting. So the acronym PIGS, which I don't think it's an accident, but the PIGS acronym should also be something that Irish people should be extremely sensitive to, because we were ourselves in a PIGS group recently, the IIGS, and some of you will remember that just about a little over a decade ago. A number of countries who had such disgraceful economies that they couldn't manage were put into this group and were described by everyone as these PIGS, which was Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain. So bad were things in Ireland that the IMF had to come in here, the World Bank, whatever, and come in here and basically run things and bail the country out because we couldn't manage our affairs. So just look what's happened. A very few, I mean, the irony is not lost on me, like just a very few short years later, here we are again, and now we're having this PIGS legislation, which would bring us back into another PIGS descriptor, because we'll be, again, a country that can't manage its own finances.
A pariah
because
state.
we're that stupid.
And a pariah state. Actually, let's hear Miss Hausdorff talk about how this could breach the European Union law we talked about earlier. So let's play that little bit of tape.
The grave breach of EU law, which I hope we will have the opportunity to come on to analyse in due course, certainly because I fundamentally disagree with some of the evidence that has previously been given to this committee in the pre-legislative scrutiny stage. That, of course, does not paint Ireland well in the international arena. If it is unilaterally exercising national policy in flagrant violation of the common commercial policy exclusivity that the European Union enjoys.
So after that, what they did was they had a number of Irish politicians who came in and questioned the witnesses, the Jewish witnesses who had spoken, and tried to defend the Irish position, or the government's position, not the government's position, but the politicians who are pushing this legislation. So the first one we heard from, right, Phelim, is Deputy Shea Brennan, right?
By the way, I took a decision here. I was just putting this together, and I think we talked about it. I'm not going to even name the parties of these people.
Because it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael.
Oh, no, they're all the same.
More profit, Sinn Féin, you know, people with profit, people without profit, people no profit at all, people are profit in their own homeland, you know. So this is Deputy Shea Brennan.
And actually, on that very point, it's worth pointing out that there was, you know, so all of these different politicians spoke, but not one of those politicians represented a political party in Ireland that was against the PIGS legislation. Is that correct?
That's correct. I should be pointed. One of my favorite facts of Ireland's anti-Semitism. The Irish Prime Minister in 1945 went to the German embassy in early June of.
Nobody forcing him.
Nobody forcing him to sign the Book of Condolences
on the death of Herr Hitler.
Yes, well, he was the leader of a near neighbouring country, and so he went to express his condolences.
Of course,
so that's the kind of country that Ireland is. So let's hear the exchange. Deputy Shea Brennan talk about some concerning statements, and Alan Shatter pushing back.
Mr. Shatter, you made some concerning statements in your opening remarks. One notably is, and I'll quote it, "The bill is the first initiative of any European government to enact legislation to intentionally boycott or discriminate against Jews." There's some other comments similar to that, in that similar vein. What solid evidence can you point to that demonstrates that the Irish government's intent is consciously anti-Semitic rather than an expression of solidarity with Palestinians in their time of oppression?
Simply, Deputy, the provisions of the bill. If you look at the definition section of the bill, the definition section references Israeli settlements means a city, village or industrial zone located in the occupied Palestinian territory, including East Jerusalem, the postal code of which is prescribed by order made, etc. The Israeli settlement reference is just a legal euphemism for saying locations in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, and oddly Gaza, where there's been no Jewish person living since 2005, but locations in, say, East Jerusalem or the West Bank where Jewish people live. I mean, it's as straightforward as that. But the oddity of the bill, and I always think Jerusalem is a classical, simple way to illustrate this, the oddity of the bill is if a tourist visiting the holy city of Jerusalem...
Chair, maybe I could interrupt there if you don't mind. I'm just conscious of time on it. So you're saying the Irish government is anti-Semitic in this case?
No, I'm saying no. What I'm saying is Israeli settlement is synonymous with locations where Jewish people reside, and ergo, this bill is prohibiting the purchase of goods from those locations, and that of itself is anti-Semitic.
Why do you believe the Irish government is anti-Semitic?
Because they've produced a bill which simply targets Jews living in, quote, occupied territory. We could argue whether it is lawfully or not lawfully occupied. No such legislation has been produced in relation to northern Cyprus, where Turks live, in relation to Tibet, where China occupied.
If you don't mind. So you're saying that because they produced the bill, they're anti-Semitic. Have you, in your opinion, have they any other motives to be anti-Semitic?
I'm saying whether they're intentionally or inadvertently producing legislation that's anti-Semitic. It is the first boycott Jews bill published by any European government since 1945, and it replicates the type of legislation that it was initiated in 1930s Germany.
Yeah, well, Alan talks there about it doesn't target Tibet, it doesn't target northern Cypriots in northern Cyprus, Turks in northern Cyprus. It basically replicates legislation initiated in 1930s Germany.
And we were talking recently to a friend of ours who's Venezuelan, and what happened recently in Venezuela, they had an election. The whole country were all excited because the opposition party, the opposition leader, was looking really good, and everyone was very excited. And then he went ahead and won the election. Super exciting, like a whole new day for Venezuela. And that election was just set aside. The result was set aside. And now the people of Venezuela, and the whole world, by the way, understand that Venezuela is a dictatorship and the people are genuinely living in a concentration camp and have all kinds of food insecurity, really horrible living conditions, very, very scary. And our friend who's Venezuelan was talking just about how deeply depressing this was.
Yes.
How the dawn, they had this hope for a new dawn, completely shattered. No one in Ireland is talking about that.
No. And no one's talking about northern Cyprus. By the way, Cyprus, that's a European country.
Irish people are going on holidays to Venezuela.
Yes. But no way.
Aren't they?
Venezuela?
Can you? Does anyone stop you?
No. Yeah, well, Irish people are actually going on holidays to You can go on holidays to northern Cyprus, an illegally occupied territory. You can get a package holiday there. You can go and...
Not all illegally occupied territories are the same then, Phelim,
no,
according to the Irish.
Some are more equal than others. Then Deputy Brian Brennan tried this. I have seen the dead and injured children argument, which, is a really ridiculous argument. So you've seen dead and injured children. They're dead. Did you see them on October 7th? I mean, is one dead and injured children? I used to cover the Northern Ireland Troubles, and I was always sent out to interview victims or families of victims, and people wanted to read it, but you have to ask, politically, what are they adding to the conversation? Does their grief have any more validity than someone else's grief? And so, anyway, Brian Brennan, he travelled to Egypt.
He went to Cairo.
And that told him what was going on in Gaza.
Well, he talked about Cairo being the coalface, and I was thinking that's really odd because Egypt have closed their border. Egypt aren't taking any Palestinians,
right? I would love to do a little Google Maps there and see how far Cairo is from Gaza.
Well, I think he probably has difficulty getting into Israel, maybe, and he's probably got difficulty certainly getting into Gaza, right?
Yes, no, but like it's not the coalface. I know a few coal miners who'd love to be at the coalface, 500 miles away from the coalface.
I think Deputy Brian Brennan hasn't done an awful lot of travel, but he was very, very excited about the fact that he'd spent the weekend in Cairo and met and seen children in hospitals.
And NGOs.
And there are children in hospitals all over the place, by the way. War is hateful and horrible and always to be avoided. And there was no war in the area on October 6th. There was no war going on of any kind until October 7th, which was started by Hamas. So, but he doesn't mention that. And that was something I asked Phelim about earlier, and we did a quick word search. Interestingly, none of these politicians talk about the hostages who are now coming up on 2 years being held captive in the most horrific conditions, underground in tunnels, being starved. I mean, people saw those people come out of those tunnels and be paraded when some of them were released, and they looked worse than people. They looked very similar to the people in the concentration camps, and the similarity was haunting. But that was not very little time. No time. Okay, let's be honest. No time at all was spent on the Irish media pointing that out.
Yes.
But he has to do this. So he's loving this whole thing that he went to Cairo and met people at the coalface. Just for your information, Brian Brennan, Cairo is not at the coalface of anything, by the way. It's the capital city of Egypt.
Which, by the way, shares a border with Gaza. And if they wanted to bring aid in, and if they wanted to let Palestinian refugees out, they could just open the border and let them out. They don't do that. Did you ask your hosts in Cairo why that wasn't happening? So
let's listen to him. Let's listen to him, his impassioned pleas.
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to congratulate you, Chair, on the balance you're bringing to this debate. We've listened to the history, we've listened to the financial aspects of it, and we listened to the complex legal argument. But we have to listen to the humanitarian side of it as well. Now, I didn't expect to go down this route, but I'm going to speak about something that I didn't expect to speak about. I'm not sure what you did, Deputy Shatter, Mr. Shatter, over the weekend, but I got on a plane and I went to Cairo. And I went to meet the people on the coalface. I went on my own. There was no media circus. I went on a personal capacity and I paid my own way. I met the NGOs that are on the coalface. These are hardened NGOs. They've been all over the world. They've seen catastrophic scenes, but what is going on in Gaza is simply on a different scale. I went and I sat on a bed with a young man that was in the prime of his life, and he has 2 months to live because of what's happening in Gaza. I played football with teenage kids that are orphans because of what's happening in Gaza. I held the hand of a 2-year-old child that had bullet wounds because of what's happening in Gaza. So when you say to me, and when you're saying to this committee, that this is a token gesture, this is fantasy politics, this is performance politics, I totally reject. How dare you come in here and make such statements? A Father Ted bill. You speak to the people on the ground that matter. Listen to what they've got to say about this bill. They knew everything about this bill. The NGOs that have seen what's going on. I just think the humanity coming from yourself, with all due respect, is just simply lax. It's my time to speak.
Sorry.
Okay?
I thought you.
I think the most important thing that we should do is listen to people that matter most, is the people that are on the ground. They are asking us to continue, and I use the word continue, for Ireland and its government to continue to take the lead. Now, I think that's a huge statement in their fight for peace and justice for the people of Palestine, and find a long-term solution. So please explain to me why you think this is fantasy politics.
Mr. Deputy, I welcome the fact you made that visit. I visited Israel, the West Bank, so many times that I couldn't actually recall the number of occasions I've been there and the different people I've engaged with. And I visited Gaza in the past, immediately after a previous conflict, and engaged with people there. And why I'm saying this is fantasy politics, and this current conflict is horrible, should never have happened, On the 6th of October 2023, there was an existing ceasefire. The 1,200 people slaughtered the following day were still living. All the people who've lost their lives in Gaza were still living, but Hamas chose to launch a war in circumstances where there was no protection.
Please answer the question. I'm asking you to answer the question. I know the facts. I've been there. I've been on the ground. I know the facts. I'm asking you to answer the question. Why are you calling this fantasy politics when we're dealing with the lives of people that are losing their lives while we're sitting here?
You are not dealing with the lives of people. What you're doing is trying to ban the importation of a small amount of olives and avocados from the West Bank and East Jerusalem, the total value of which over 5 years came to €685,000. It's a thing of complete irrelevance in the context of
But the point I'm making, and that you're not listening, it's not irrelevant to the people that are on the ground.
It is irrelevant because if they think this is meaningful and is going to contribute to peace and a resolution of this horrible conflict, they're being misled by Irish politicians. Deputy, I'm as committed as you are to see permanent peace between Israelis and Palestinians. No further wars. People getting on in security and harmony.
I think actions speak louder than words.
In their lives.
I agree to disagree because I think actions speak far louder than words.
Well, I don't think a single visit, Deputy, to Egypt is the be-all and end-all.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. You said that.
Resolving the conflict. And this bill certainly won't resolve the conflict.
Well, as Alan Shatter says, this bill will not resolve that conflict.
Yeah.
In fact, it might exacerbate it. Then Deputy Cathy Bennett, who I think is Sinn Féin, but as I say, it's irrelevant. She tried the experts agree with me argument.
Oh, yeah.
And the experts were NGOs who, of course, have never found Israel to do anything good.
Ever.
In
history.
And their enemies, be it Palestinians, Iran or Hamas, have never done anything bad. Never.
And by the way, NGOs like, NGOs like some of them LGBTQ NGOs, by the way, who seem to have such an incredible, I don't know, kind of, it's like a mental illness, by the way. How you can be an NGO for an LGBTQ population, how you could possibly be them and be in support of Palestinians.
Well, I think
and the people in Gaza, where you would be murdered, you would be assassinated, you'd be executed for being gay, and I just don't get it. I still haven't found anyone to break it down for me. Queers for Palestine. Are you joking? You win this is the biggest joke of all time. Like, it's turkeys for Christmas. That's exactly what it means. It's turkeys for Christmas. It's mad. So these expert NGOs, I'm just, NGO, by the way, NGO, non-governmental organisation, I'll make it even simpler for you. That's not even the proper acronym. Basically, I'm going to start an organisation on my own here in the thing, and I'm going to call it an NGO, and fair enough, off you go, call it an NGO.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean you're an expert in anything.
And then I'm going to apply for government funding.
Always.
Yes, and be overly reliant, or almost all reliant on government funding.
Okay, back to Cathy Bennett, Phelim. Tell us more about Cathy Bennett.
Can I just say, I don't think they would assassinate queers for Palestine, because that would involve wasting a bullet. They would throw them off a building. But
you just throw them off a building. Fair enough.
I particularly liked her comment about the Palestinian trade unions, as if there's this active trade union movement taking on the government, for better working conditions in Gaza. And it's like, there would be no more, imagine them going on strike.
Yes, the government in Gaza is called Hamas.
Yes.
They're a prescribed terrorist organisation.
Yes, their negotiating skills are limited.
Who intentionally shot babies in the head during the October 7 massacre, and we know far too much, and raped and pillaged, and the stories are obviously horrific, and many of them featured in our play October 7th.
Let's hear the exchange between Deputy Bennett and Miss Natasha Hausdorff, the barrister.
You have claimed that it would harm Palestinians if this bill goes through. That's not what the Palestinians themselves say. We have letters of support from 60 Palestinian NGOs, human rights organisations and trade unions. Palestinian farmers told the Irish Times last week that the bill is a source of hope. A Palestinian advocate will appear before this committee shortly, strongly supporting this measure. Palestinian representative to the UN formally called all states to end trade with Israelis' illegal settlements. Do you think Palestinians are not able to determine what is in their own interests and that you know better? To any of the witnesses.
Well, Rabbi, I'll come to you because you wanted, again, you can answer the last question as well and this question if you wish.
Well, I wanted to respond to the previous point that
do,
was made. If, as you say, all that Ireland can do at this stage is a matter of symbolism, and that is important, but I would just ask, why is the symbolism always focused on blaming Israel? Why do we hardly ever see blame put on Hamas, that they need to lay down their arms and not keep on saying they want to eradicate Israel, to repeat October 7th? Why is the blame never put on Iran? Why do we very rarely hear calls for the release of the hostages? And this bill is just another example of the symbolism which is always focused on demonizing Israel and laying all the blame squarely on Israel's shoulders and not recognizing that there's Hamas and Iran and everyone else involved in this as well.
Chair, may I briefly answer both of those questions together, because they are linked, and the key is the misinformation that Hamas and its supporters are putting out. 1,847,915 tons of aid have been facilitated by Israel into the Gaza Strip throughout this war. As of last weekend, 73 million meals had been distributed by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation in its first couple of months of operation. That is the reality. What we are hearing from so many of those who profess to speak on behalf of the Palestinians, including NGOs, who frankly should know better, is a false narrative here. And the proof of that pudding was in the fact that they immediately came out to tell Palestinian civilians not to accept aid from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. The reason for this is because it is the first mechanism that has successfully delivered aid, which has then not been diverted to Hamas. So the theme here continues. It is succor for Hamas, support for Hamas, and the prolongation of this conflict, which is at the core of the misinformation about aid, the misinformation that circulates these blood libels of genocide or the targeting of civilians, which is completely contrary to what Israel has demonstrated.
And then Alan Shatter, the former defence minister and justice minister, he pointed out how this could affect international and American travellers to Ireland. You know, it's going to have all kinds of unintended consequences. You know, it's going to have the not the unintended, but the unthought out consequence of making Ireland a pariah state. It's going to perhaps force Irish companies to leave, American companies to leave Ireland. But it's also going to create difficulties at borders for people travelling through Ireland with goods from...
Potentially from Jerusalem. Or,
from Jerusalem.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's hear that.
In the United States, Jerusalem is regarded as the capital of Israel. That's the entirety of Jerusalem, east and west. In this bill, to put it in the most simple way I can, if someone visiting Israel or visiting the Holy Land, be they of whatever religion, from the Republic of Ireland, or be they an executive from an American company, returns to Ireland and Dublin Airport, having purchased goods in Jerusalem, under this bill, that will be goods that can be confiscated. If they bring them into the state, it's a criminal offence. And as far as American law will be concerned, this will be requiring executives or tourists into Ireland to comply with a boycott that the United States does not accept.
And I want to end with Alan Shatter, and this is very, very important. What will end this war? You know, this bill will not end this war, will end this conflict. Hamas is defeated now. They should surrender. They could decommission their arms like they did in Northern Ireland, and they should release the hostages, and the war will end by noon today.
The war would have ended. The war would have ended within a day if they'd let the hostages out and put down their arms.
Yes.
So the only reason there's a war is because of Hamas.
Yes.
Just extraordinary.
Let's hear Alan Shatter outline that in detail.
The importation of 685,000 euros of goods over a period of 5 years is entrenching absolutely nothing. It's a thing of complete irrelevance. In the context of the other issues that have been raised and referenced, the perception the Chairman referenced derives, Chairman, frankly, from the focus, as stated by the Chief Rabbi and Morris Cohen, on Israel, and the fact that this committee and the House doesn't prioritise calling in the Iranian government, doesn't prioritise apart from the ritual call for the release of hostages, does nothing about it. There's never been a call from this House that the Red Cross visit hostages in Gaza. There's never been an expression of critique because Hamas doesn't allow that. The macabre spectacle presented on the release of hostages that looked like concentration camp victims elicited no reaction from any member of this committee. So if you think we're being harsh by saying there's a perception that this bill is anti-Semitic, the perception derives from the one-sided approach to this horrible conflict. Because I come back and I say no more tonight unless somebody asks me. To one very specific fact. It's been a fact since the 7th of October 2023. If Hamas long ago had released all the hostages, long ago, this conflict would have been over long ago. It's been normalised within the Irish political system that men and women, earlier children, be retained as hostages and negotiating cards and be kept in tunnels and starved. And this is why there's a perception of a lack of balance, a perception of anti-Semitism. And I reiterate, the one fact that drives many families in Israel to distraction is that the hostages have now been kept for 646 days, and we're talking about the export of olives and avocados, minuscule amounts, as if it's the most important issue in the world.
So, as you say, no no hostages mentioned. The bill will be further debated and could become...
And I mean, it's kind of extraordinary because I was asking Alan Shatter about this, and it actually could become law in October, which is... yeah.
We could do it for October 7th.
Oh, no. I mean, it could actually literally coincide with the anniversary of the massacre on October 7th. Unbelievable. This targeted anti-Israel bill. Yeah.
Wow.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm literally actually speechless
about
that.
Yeah. No, that could happen. I was asking him what the timeline was, and he said October, November. But it actually could become law. But what I think, again, I want to make that point. I just think it's just to show you how principled, suddenly Ireland is developing a conscience about this particular bill, but it's only based on the financial ruin that would be wrought because of it.
Yes. So go to October7theplay.com. We're going to bring the play around America, around the world, perhaps to Ireland. Watch this space.
We'd certainly like to bring it to Dublin.
We went to Israel after October 7, interviewed people about the day, made it into an incredible play. The New York Post called it a spellbinding display of truth.
Actually, you know what we'll do? I think we'll just show a clip from the October 7 play now, which will remind us all about, what actually happened on October 7th.
Lolly helped me navigate.
Okay, turn right. No. Don't go over there. There's birds flying from the trees. They're shooting people over there. Okay, go between there. Take a left here. Go.
There were 3 of us in the car. My friend Gilad was in the back. Lolly, my girlfriend, God, she was so calm. She was in the front with me, and I'm driving. These Hamas vehicles, they're barreling right towards us, guns and everything. Lolly was hiding. And this one guy on a motorcycle, this terrorist, he was so close. I was staring him right in the eyes, and him back at me. And I nod to him like we know each other. Like, we're together. And he nods back at me, like, you're okay. And then he sees my girlfriend, he starts shouting in Arabic, shoot the Jews, kill the Jews, slaughter the Jews. I take a big left. One bullet hits the back door. Gilad starts yelling. Fuck, I got shot in the head. Don't worry, I'll get us out of here. My girlfriend starts to pray.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai.
The guy on the motorcycle, he tries to shoot again, so I swerve into him. He flies off of his bike 2 meters into the air, into the fields. And then another. So I just turn into him, I just catch him with the back of my car, and he flies off. I swear, if I had had a camera attached to the car, I could have sold the footage to Spielberg himself. I did what I did, my girlfriend said the prayer, and then I did what I did. It's not even about the prayer, it's about what I had to do.
So we want to bring this play around the world. We want to bring it to Ireland. That'll be interesting. We're a not-for-profit, a 501c3. Please help us do that. Give what you can.
You can donate on the website.
October7.
October7theplay.com.
October7theplay.com.
Or at unreportedstorysociety.com. We'll put both of those up in the show notes and also on the screen so you can easily find a way to donate to keep us going. We would really, really appreciate it. But you did an interview earlier, Phelim, with Joe Rigney.
Yes. We're going to go over to that interview now. And I've wanted to interview him, and I wanted to cover this topic for quite a while because, by the way, it just refers back to what we've just covered. You know, emotional responses to an answer that should have a rational answer or indeed a political answer based on rational facts. How damaging emotional responses are. And Joe Rigney has written a book, The Sin of Empathy, which is a very provocative title. Listen to this interview. It's well worth a listen. It'll make you think twice. And that's what we want to make you do every time you come on this show, every time you listen to this show. So let's go over to that interview now. So I'm joined now by Dr. Joe Rigney. Dr. Rigney serves as a Fellow of Theology at New St. Andrews College. He received a Master of Arts from Bethlehem College and Seminary and a PhD in Theology from the University of Chester. Prior to serving at New St. Andrews, Professor Rigney served as President of Bethlehem College and a seminary in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and as a pastor at Cities Church in St. Paul, Minnesota. He's the author of many books, including Live Like a Narnian, which I'm going to start reading immediately after this interview because the title has got me. He's also written The Things of Earth and Leadership and Emotional Sabotage. It's his most recent book, The Sin of Empathy, Compassion and Its Counterfeits. That's the reason he's on the show today. Dr. Rigney, welcome to the Ann Phelim Scoop.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for coming on. Well, first of all, thank you for writing this book. It's a brave title, open to much interpretation and much misinterpretation. I imagine much of it deliberate because that's the world we live in. First of all, let's define the terms, right? What's your definition of empathy? I know you spend a whole chapter defining it. Sorry to ask you to do it in a few minutes. Also, this may sound funny. What's your definition of sin as well?
Yeah, that's good. So sin's actually an easier one. Sin is doing anything, taking a good thing and in ways that God has forbidden. So it's attempting to use a good thing in times or in ways or in degrees that God has forbidden. So it's the corruption of some good. It's a missing of the mark according to God's standard as set forth in Scripture. And the empathy thing is a little bit of a trickier one because it's a relatively recent term. I think that people probably don't appreciate that it's less than 100 years old in English, and it's contested. There's a lot of different definitions. So the two that I use in the book, one of which is sort of a neutral use, means something like sharing of emotions. So to empathize with someone is to actually share their emotions to some degree. And so if you're happy, I'm happy. If you're sad, I'm sad. And that neutral definition can be good. It can be used, if it's a part of, human connection. The more common definition I use in the book is the way that empathy is actually used in practice in modern culture, which is more precisely untethered empathy, in which empathy, that sharing of emotions becomes so total and immersive that we lose touch with what is true, what is good. We lose touch with reality, and we're simply carried along by the emotions of other people, by the feelings of others.
Yeah, funny. The word, the tethering word, jumped out at me about this book. Actually, it's all about tethering. So I want to come back to that. You're right. Empathy is of recent vintage. And you say that the person who brought you to it was Milton Friedman.
Edwin Friedman.
Edwin Friedman.
Yeah. Milton Friedman's the economist. Edwin Friedman is the family's therapist in Washington, D.C.
Right. He argued that empathy has become a sacred cow, which allows the least mature and the most reactive members of a community to hijack the community's agenda. And you found that the world seems to be trying to prove his thesis right.
That's right.
Correct. Everywhere you looked, you saw evidence of chronic anxiety, a herd mentality, and low thresholds for emotional pain and distress. Passions were in the driver's seat. There was an unfortunate lack of sober-minded, self-differentiated leadership in both the wider culture and, this really struck out at me, the church.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in those lines.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in the nature of you call it the manipulation of pity, but also the culture and the church. A lot going on there. Please explain.
Yeah, sure. So the basic idea that Friedman had was that when we're in these kind of highly reactive environments, which Western culture has been in this highly reactive state for decades now, what happens is that the herd mentality, that our desire for togetherness as a community sort of gets hijacked. It becomes overpowering so that the most reactive and immature members come to set the agenda for the whole community. And they do so by means of the empathy of the wider community. And so everybody kind of walks on eggshells. Friedman argued that empathy had become a power tool in the hands of the sensitive. And so the basically one way to think about it, if you think about the last decade or so, and what I affectionately call the victimhood Olympics that we just lived through,
Yes.
in which basically we committed to reorganize society around victimhood. And so the greatest victim wins. They get to set the agenda.
Yes.
Their concerns, they're in the driver's seat, which set off this competition for people to sort of decide, well, I'm the greatest victim and here's why, and I'm the greatest victim and here's why. And all of the critical theory, the critical race theory, the queer theory, all of these sort of things were basically different efforts to win the victimhood game because our empathy had become untethered from reality. And therefore, the greatest victim was allowed to steer the community. Or their advocates. Oftentimes, I should say that. Oftentimes, victims were victims, but advocates realized that victims could be wielded very effectively against institutions in order to derail them or take them in a different direction.
Correct. Yeah. There's a lot there. I just would like to add, the Jewish people have found that the victimhood Olympics has winners and losers.
It
And,
does.
they were one of the biggest, probably the biggest promoters. No, they were huge promoters of the victimhood Olympics in America and have been for decades. And now they've found to their cost that they're not, that it's a zero-sum game, and you either win it or you lose it. And they've lost it. So it's interesting. I will also add in my defense, I would think Milton Friedman would have little time for empathy.
That's probably true.
It's probably true. Yeah. So what's the difference between empathy? Now, you talk about biblical compassion.
Yeah.
Right? And you quote some passages about biblical compassion. What's the difference between empathy and compassion? Because they sound similar to the uneducated or untethered.
Yeah. Yeah. So compassion or sympathy, and I use those interchangeably, is the biblical term for a virtuous response to human suffering. And so when you see someone who's suffering, out of a desire to relieve that suffering, you take compassionate action to pursue their good. And the image I use for this in the book is if you have someone who's drowning, and what do? Say they're drowning in quicksand. On the one hand, you want to reach in and help them. So you do join them at some level in their suffering, in their pain. But it's really important that you remain anchored to the shore. You grab a branch.
To quote a word, tethered.
Tethered.
Yes.
Right. And so you want to be, so biblical compassion is tethered in two directions. You're tethered to the shore, which is you're tethered to Christ, you're tethered to truth, you're tethered to what's good, and then you're connected to the person who's in the pit. That's biblical compassion. What empathy sought to do, and it's interesting, there was actually a review of my book in the New York Times just a few days ago, and it was interesting to, it was critical, very critical of my book, along with another book, and in the same vein, but it basically acknowledged the central thesis, which is that empathy was pitched as an improvement upon compassion and sympathy. It was pitched as compassion 2.0. This is the upgraded version. And when you ask, what's the upgraded version? Well, compassion had too much distance because you were holding on to the shore. You were tethered to reality, and empathy.
Is what they said. This is what they were saying.
Yeah. This is what the New York Times reviewer was saying, was actually and I was just cheering because I said, that's great. That's what my book says. My book says that empathy was pitched as compassion 2.0 because it required a greater identification. I used words like an immersion or a fusion with the person who was suffering, such that you do lose touch with what's good. You're so focused on their immediate feelings that you don't have regard for their long-term good or the long-term good of others or the whole community. And instead, everything's the front and center, which in the analogy would be someone's drowning in quicksand and you just jump in with them. And now you're you're totally empathizing with them. I'm feeling everything you feel, and I'm totally empathizing with them. And then I'll just mention the third possible response, which is also everybody recognizes this would be bad. If someone's drowning and you just turn around and walk the other way, that's apathy. And so that's apathy or callousness, which we don't want to have at all. But everybody recognizes that's bad. It's harder to recognize how could it be wrong for me to jump in there with them? Well, now you've got two people who are drowning.
In some ways, it's complicated, but it's very self-evident also. The idea, I mean, even from the point of view as a journalist, people say to me, we went to Israel after October 7, we interviewed about 20 people who'd been through. People say, how did you cope? And I didn't want to sound cold and callous, but like the last thing they need is my empathy. The last thing they need is my tears. They do not need my tears. And in fact, I'd be failing them if I started crying, if I started immersing myself. I have to be, somewhere in between compassion and even a little bit of apathy, not apathy, but I have to help them. There has to be a distance.
Yeah. And emotional, in order to keep your head, in order for you to see clearly the situation, and as a journalist in that case, to be able to represent it well to a wider audience, you do need to see the social suffering. You do need to be able to communicate that to some degree, but you have to have a certain kind of emotional distance in order to do them good. And everybody recognizes this when it comes to other emotions. Like we talk this way. We say things like, I was blinded by anger, or I was paralyzed by fear, or I was overcome by grief. And we recognize that these other emotions can be so powerful that they overwhelm our minds. We don't see clearly. We don't act wisely. But then all of a sudden, when it comes to this other emotion, whether you call it pity or sympathy or empathy, doesn't matter the term. But when it comes to that, we don't recognize the way that our reason, what we think and what we know to be true, what we know to be good, can get smothered, hijacked, derailed, because the other person's suffering is so powerful, or their emotions are so powerful, that we put them in our driver's seat. And now we're just off to the races, and we're no longer anchored to what's good for them, and we'll enable all kinds of destructive behaviors. And like you said, it is a sort of common sense intuition that people have. Like everybody, if you said, hey, if you felt bad for an alcoholic who was, just destroying their life through alcohol, and you felt bad for them, but then then they ask you for a drink, and because you felt bad for them and they were so sad, you decided to give them a bunch of alcohol. Everybody recognized that's not truly compassionate.
No.
But it's like, but what happened? So that narrow example, everybody would agree on, but we often fail to recognize the way that exact dynamic is playing out in so many of our political debates or our personal relationships in our lives. Yeah.
Yeah. When you talked about, being in the driver's seat, if you're in the driver's seat or the other person's in the driver's seat and you're in the car, you'll drive over the cliff together,
That's right.
Why is empathy cool?
Why is it cool?
No, why now? Why not 10, 15 years ago? What's happened?
Yeah, well, so I think what's happening now is there's actually a backlash against the empathetic manipulation that we've endured, especially over the last 10 or 15 years. It goes back farther. I think the seeds of it in higher education, for example, this was a big push going all the way back to the 70s. Since I've written the book, I've had friends send me, hey, here's some curriculum from the academy back in the 70s and 80s, where they were really pushing this idea of a more total immersion, emotional learning, these sorts of things. Yes. But you're seeing a backlash against it because I think people realize the way that progressives, I would say progressives in particular, had hijacked the natural human, and in terms of the West, the sort of Christian dimension of compassion in order to pursue a particular agenda. So in all of our sort of culture war debates, whether you're talking about abortion, whether you're talking about LGBTQ, whether you're talking about immigration or climate change, you take your pick, progressives became very adept at manipulating a very good thing. And I think this is important to stress, that compassion in and of itself is a very good thing.
Yes.
And one of the lessons I learned from C.S. Lewis, who I quote extensively in the book, is that it's good things that are most destructive when they go wrong. When a good thing like compassion or love gets hijacked and untethered, it becomes highly destructive, harmful. Lewis says it actually becomes a demon. Love, when it becomes a god, becomes a demon.
Oh, yeah.
And it leaves destruction everywhere in its wake. And so you see that in all of these different political debates. And I think what's happened, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, people have begun to wise up to that manipulation. And so there's a backlash. So you have books like mine, which is the fruit of about 7 or 8 years of reflection on this subject. And then other books. Ali Beth Stuckey wrote a book called Toxic Empathy. Gad Saad is regularly talking about this. And Elon Musk is a big fan of his. The Trump administration, I think, operates according to this principle in many ways. So I think you're seeing, so and because it stopped working, I think what you're seeing is progressive journalists and groups, not panicking is maybe too strong, but concerned. They're going, oh no, our typical strategies are no longer working. What do we do?
As a journalist, I can tell you, even in my own reading of other journalists, or even in other journalists, this idea of starting every article about immigration with a sob story about some woman who sold tamales and, and her 19 children, it just doesn't work anymore. Because people are investigating the sob stories and finding they're not entirely true, but it's just the whole emotional manipulation. For some reason, it's not getting through. It's not working the way it used to, which is a good thing. One of the worst examples of empathy, actually, we haven't really talked about this. You talk a lot about how it's infiltrated the church, which, of course, if you weren't close to the church, people looking out from outside in would say, how could that happen in the church? How can this happen in the church, that empathy has infiltrated?
I think part of what happened is, well, obviously, because compassion is a biblical command, we're told by Jesus to be kind and tenderhearted. He's a model for compassion. He was moved by compassion in saving the world and in his ministry. And so Christians know we're supposed to be compassionate. The challenge came when all of a sudden the redefinition of compassion into total affirmation, validation of anybody's, that hijacking, which was that untethering, basically combining a compassionate impulse with relativism. Your truth is your truth and my truth is my truth. That dynamic meant that basically Christians lost sight of the relativism because they were so concerned with having a reputation often for compassion. We wanted to be seen as compassionate, and the world said, unless you do XYZ, you're not compassionate. You're hard-hearted and calloused. And so because Christians didn't want to be accused of all those sort of nasty words, we were willing to bend on a whole host of issues, to mute our witness when it came to sexual ethics, to draw back from certain discussions, whether it's on immigration or whether it's on abortion, because we didn't want to offend people, and we didn't want them to say, you don't care about women because you're always going on and on about abortion. And so because we didn't want that reputation, we were willing to mute ourselves. And so that was the steering wheel that the world found to mute Christian witness. And it's a very effective one. Or has been. I think there's, again, areas of the church that never buckled, and more that we're realizing, hey, that was a bad move. We lost a lot of ground because we were so concerned to impress the progressives. We had a progressive on our shoulder evaluating whether or not we were sufficiently Christ-like, which is a terrible standard to have.
Yes. Correct. I want to wrap up now, but I have it's kind of two questions in one. Well, so empathy is very seductive. It's a very, as we were saying, who wants to be said they're not empathetic, they're not compassionate, and they're mixed together? How can we convince young people who are more prone to empathy than perhaps older people? How can we convince? There are a lot of parents and grandparents watching this podcast. I know my audience. How can they convince their grandchildren or nephews and nieces that empathy is a bad thing?
Yeah, I think what it has to do is you have to show them what this is why the book's called Compassion and Its Counterfeits, is that you want to be able to communicate to people who are in the grip of this false empathy that there's actually a genuine article that's better and more loving and is kinder than the false version of it. And so to be able to acknowledge, I know that you're soft-hearted, but you also need to be clear-headed. It's not enough to have a soft heart and to be steered by your emotions. I think actually one of the best ways in for a lot of people is to say, anybody who's ever been on the receiving end of a pity party knows how easy compassion and empathy can be manipulated. And so when you go, hey, when a family member will put on the long face and play the martyr in order to get you to do something that you don't want to do, and you know how you don't like that? You know how it's frustrating to you whenever somebody's manipulating your soft-heartedness? Okay, that thing right there, we need to learn to actually resist that manipulation for their sake and for ours. And in order to actually do good for them, we should actually pursue their long-term good, which means now we're moving the conversation from the immediate feelings of the moment to what actually is good. What is good for people? Is it good to castrate children because they say they've been indoctrinated to say, I'm not a boy anymore, I'm a girl? Is it good to actually indulge that fantasy? And the answer is no, it's harmful. And we're going to see, I'm fully convinced over the next 5-10 years, we're already seeing this, that those who were indoctrinated into gender ideology and then had surgeries or chemical treatments are going to get on the far side of that moment, and they're going to be angry. They're going to, their lives have been now destroyed, permanently destroyed, as Abigail Shrier says, irreversible damage. And they're going to come saying like, why did you do this? And the answer, the honest answer for a lot of folks is it was empathy. Their parents are going to have to say, the doctor said, if we didn't do this, you would commit suicide. And we didn't want you to commit. And I think this is a place where I think biblical justice would demand sue those people into oblivion. Some people need to go to jail. This was a horrific and great evil done in the name of empathy. And so I think as those sort of issues began to be more manifest, I think people will be able to see it more clearly. Like, hey, we need to be more grounded in what's true and what's good, and then let our emotions follow rather than lead.
The butchers of empathy. I'd love to talk more to you. I suppose, yes, I think that's a good way to end. The butchers of empathy. People will kill you for empathy. To empathize with you. Yeah. So if we can make people understand that would be so. The book is called The Sin of Empathy, Compassion and Its Counterfeits by Dr. Joe Rigney, wherever you get your books available. It's badly reviewed in the New York Times. Actually, it's kind of weirdly badly reviewed because it actually reinforces. They think it's a hatchet job, and you're going, that's exactly what I'm saying.
Exactly right.
Great talking to you, Dr. Rigney, and let's have you back on the show.
Thanks for having me.
As I say, I wish I could have done a longer interview.
Yes.
Maybe. Because when you're saying something as provocative as the sin of empathy,
yes,
you want to give the person as much time as possible so that they can't be misinterpreted.
I like the title. I like the fact that he actually calls it a sin.
Yes. No. And we, listen, buy the book, send the link to all your friends. It's well worth reading, and it's an important part of the dialogue. So I have a story.
I'm looking at the show notes here, and Phelim has a story for me. What story do you have for me, Phelim?
Well, certain stories, I just love springing stories on you sometimes. I've noticed this, in the New York Times or, in their problem page, my brother, supports Trump, or my husband, they use the problem pages and they invent these ridiculous problems that are quite obviously political, a way of covering politics.
Yes, getting another dig at Trump if they can,
and pushing a political message without, and they just make it up. It's quite obvious that the thing is made up.
And, okay,
so
you have a nice example. The Irish Times, okay,
and it's the person who does their problems is Trish Murphy, and it starts off with a common enough problem. I'm really starting to dislike my husband.
Oh dear. Oh, okay.
Yes.
That's not very nice.
No, it's not. But would he hear why you'll understand, Anne. We are nearly a decade married and have small children. We always got on so well.
What's going wrong, Phelim?
Similar sense of humor, seeing the lighter side of life. And our values used to align in terms of raising our children.
Okay.
I know he's very unhappy in his job. See this, what's coming next is not
blame game here.
It's not political. It's because he's an unhappy individual. This is laying the ground.
Okay.
I know he's very unhappy in his job, and I've been encouraging him to leave. Of course, she's the good wife, and he presents with an attitude, why should I? He's become so negative that I'm completely drained. He's bitter and resentful. What is really troubling me,
however,
and causing me to dislike him, is that he has become extremely interested in and angry about immigration issues. So
that's what it's really about.
That's a negative. He's constantly sending me videos from dubious sites with the most negative accounts of asylum seekers, many of which I am sure are fake. Well, why don't you check it out? Sorry, Trish. You know, I mean, or not Trish. This is anonymous, but like, I'm sure they're fake. Well, you know, you could actually talk to him about it and actually ask.
Yeah.
And by the way, point out if they are fake.
Yeah.
He is subscribing to all sorts of conspiracy theories around matters not being reported in the media and the dangers of people seeking international protection. That's the dangers of refugees. I wonder, like, you know, that's completely on call for that, because there's been no examples of refugees knifing people or stabbing
beheading people in the town that we're sitting in right now.
Yes, not far from here, 2 gay men were
actually beheaded.
Yes, by an immigrant, a refugee, in fact. So he's also harboring all this stuff about male roles. You know, traditional
male roles.
Yes,
okay.
Yes. And then there's this. We traveled extensively in our 20s. We lived and worked abroad, sometimes illegally. We weren't fleeing war. We weren't traveling. He's always loved meeting people of different cultures and traveling. Yes. Anyway. So she goes on to this, and a number of my friends have stopped visiting because they find the debates awkward. Right? He debates with friends.
Debating would be very awkward.
Very awkward. Yes.
Very awkward to debate with somebody who doesn't agree with you. Yeah,
yes.
Very.
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people really like that debating where everyone agrees.
Yes.
Particularly Irish media, actually.
Yes.
They really love that.
Are they your friends? How can I get through to them? I can't live with agreeing to disagree. Well, you know, you could actually...
People do it.
Talk to them. You could actually talk to them too. Like,
apparently you were in love with him once.
Yes. I can't cope with the goading. And to be frank, I find his online presence an embarrassment. And let's just summarize Trish Murphy's, who's a answer to this solution.
Oh, what does she say?
He needs to go to therapy.
No.
Yes.
Oh, no. She says that?
Yes.
Okay, that's very good. Okay, I was waiting for the punchline. Actually, that's the punchline. That's
yes.
very good.
No,
so the answer from the extremely highly intelligent, you know, well-rounded, sophisticated Irish Times writer is: your husband has a different opinion than you, has different politics than you. He needs therapy.
Yes, and you could go with him, and you could make a couples counselling.
Fantastic.
He may refuse.
In which case,
your relationship is in serious trouble.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Moving right along.
Yes. No, I thought you'd appreciate.
Moving right along. I know this next story, Phelim, I know is like one of your favorites, because I know that Jussie Smollett, and I will say in defense of my husband, and I'm always defending my husband, not that I need to. My husband is a great journalist, and I remember very distinctly the first day that the Jussie Smollett story was reported, and my husband said, something doesn't smell right there. You were, from the very beginning, you said, watch this space. There's something not right about this.
No, as a journalist, when the story
is too good to be true, it is
too good to be true. And I knew this with the University of Virginia rape story. It was like there was a woman. When something feels like a movie, it's written. It was written by someone as a script. I remember the part of the UVA rape case. She was flung on a glass table and it shattered.
Brilliant.
And I'm going,
that'd make a great scene. Yeah,
but
great scene.
Tables don't shatter.
I mean, go on. Okay, tell us about so you've called this story Abula Smollett.
Yes. So some grandmother, a 41-year-old undocumented grandmother from South LA, Julia Palaez Calderon. She was kidnapped by ICE, held in a warehouse.
My God.
Strip searched, the whole thing went missing. Her daughter launched a GoFundMe, and she was ghosted in the system. Even the federal agents said,
they couldn't even
find her. It was a very harrowing tale.
And then it was discovered that, in fact, she faked her own kidnapping.
Yes. And
she's been charged now with conspiracy and making false statements.
Yes.
How much money was collected, by the way, Phelim, by the GoFundMe?
I think it was 60,000 and counting.
Nice.
So
she was accused of orchestrating her fake kidnapping by federal immigration. On the 30th of June, Calderon's family held a press conference where they alleged to the members of the press that she was taken by bounty hunters that worked for the government.
Yes.
So
yeah, good. Yeah, no, listen. Again, it was a story too good to be true.
Oh
and the
yeah,
media
well, unlike Jessie Smollett. Remember Jessie Smollett was holding a Subway sandwich. Well, in this case, the family reported at the press conference that she was in a Jack in the Box parking lot at the time of her kidnapping. Very specific, very colourful. That I like that. The daughter launched a GoFundMe campaign, and federal agents began to search for Calderon because, surprise, surprise, she wasn't in any of their records, and they were like, where is this woman?
Yes.
The family said that she was a local community activist, and one member was caught on tape collapsing during the press conference. Extraordinarily dramatic stuff.
Oh, yes.
They also told a very harrowing tale about her being driven to San Ysidro, presented with self-deportation paperwork which she refused to sign, and held in a warehouse somewhere with other families and denied food. Oh yeah. So they also starved.
Well, I've seen the mugshot. She could do with being denied food.
But somehow she did manage to escape, apparently, because she was found later at a shopping plaza in Bakersfield.
I think I'd rather be deported. Oh no!
I don't know how she claimed to escape, but it sounds like one of those where she miraculously escaped and ran away on foot or something. But for reference, she was geographically on the other side of Los Angeles, and we know, by the way, because we very rarely cross Los Angeles, because crossing Los Angeles makes you give up the will to live, really, because it just takes forever,
One thing we didn't talk about Los Angeles, where was that park? MacArthur Park, was it, or Echo Park? That Karen Bass was saying children were playing. We've driven past that park.
Frightening.
It is frightening. Like it is thousands of homeless people. You wouldn't send your worst enemy there. There's just so much misinformation.
But the DOJ said anyway, the Department of Justice said that she was shown in surveillance footage leaving a Jack in the Box parking lot and getting into a sedan, unlike what she had, the dramatic story that she had created.
Yeah, thank you, Abuela, for that. Abuela Smollett for that life relief. And last week we had
amazing comments.
We had a great show where we basically posted videos from the Federal Trade Commission.
If you haven't seen it, we'd really recommend if you go back and watch last week's episode.
Yes.
People really did appreciate it. I'm just going to read a couple of these comments. One person who wrote said, "Thank you so much for posting this. I have 3 grandchildren who have fallen into this horrible ideology. They range in age from 36 to 29 and have all suffered sexual, physical and mental abuse during their childhoods. There are 3 different mothers for my 5 grandchildren, with my son as the father. They've been diagnosed with mental illnesses, autism, etc. They were all seen by the same psychologist, whom I pray will one day be prosecuted for leading these vulnerable and hurting human beings to believe all their trauma could be solved by changing their sexes.
Yes.
Through medication and surgery. The lie of transgenderism has led my beloved grandchildren into a life of medicalization and harm to the bodies they were born into. They've blocked all my access. This is the stuff that's really killing stuff. They've blocked all my access to their lives. I've not heard from any of them, my son or my great-grandchildren, for 6 years now. The last I heard from any of the grandchildren, one granddaughter who was not trans, stated that her 2 teenage daughters were dressing as and being called boys. With the future being played out before them in their aunt and 2 uncles' lives, what in the world do some people still believe? Yeah. In sharing this Federal Trade Commission hearing with your readers, you have done a great service to those of us who have been trying to bring reality to light. God bless you. Love, Indio. A message from Zachary Arthur Gonzalez. My childhood friend began transitioning at 15, was affirmed, fast-tracked and celebrated. Now she lives with chronic pain and regret. Thank you for giving people like her a voice. Detransitioner stories are growing louder and louder.
They are.
Another one, Phelim, do you want to read that one from
I know someone, Sean Ethan Young, 49. I know someone who went through that different clinic in St. Louis. They were given hormones after a 20-minute Zoom meeting. They're 19 now and things ain't great for them. And that we hear this all the time, a Zoom call, and suddenly you're prescribed these life-changing hormones.
And this next comment, by the way, is the one that kind of, and we get these comments every now and again, and they're the ones that make it all worthwhile, by the way. So somebody called Min Ho wrote and said, not everyone who supports trans kids is evil. Some of us genuinely believe we're helping. But hearing this, I need to rethink things. Doesn't that sound like...
Yes.
I remember somebody who watched our Gosnell movie and said that they would have to rethink their whole approach to abortion because of the movie that we made. So when we see stuff like that, it's actually, just think again, it's like my good friend Melanie. And she has a column where she asks people to just think again, you know.
And the next column, the next comment, I like this.
Douglas Murphy.
I had a friend whose daughter was fast-tracked on hormones after 2 visits. Wow, 2 visits. Mostly it's only 1 visit.
Yeah.
She now lives with irreversible damage and crippling regret. It's absolutely horrifying what's happening under the banner of care.
Yeah.
Please keep her in your prayers.
Ralph Thomas wrote and said, absolutely devastating. I had to pause several times listening to that last testimony. No parent should have to bury their child because of institutional failure.
Yeah.
Suing them into oblivion still is never going to bring back that sweet child.
Yeah.
And then the next one from Philip, who says, perhaps your most powerful episode ever. And that says something. Another person, Claire's testimony. Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. I'm a mom. I just want to hug her through the screen. She's only 20 and has to live with that pain forever. Who allowed this?
And then we got an interesting comment, and I looked this up afterwards because I thought it was very interesting. So somebody wrote, Sally6102, the monster John Money donated his art collection to the Eastern Southland Art Gallery in 2002. The collection is housed in a small rural town, Gore, New Zealand, in what is called the John Money Wing. Unfortunately, the Gore District Council, ratepayers, financially supports this venture. I, along with other residents, are shocked that we seem to be honouring this evil man.
Explain to people who John Money is, Anne.
And for those of you who didn't watch last week, I mean, John Money is basically one of the founding fathers of this gender madness and this gender identity. He's the guy, an evil man who basically invented the whole idea of gender being a cultural addition rather than something
and that you can be born in the wrong
you can be born in wrong body. Very, very briefly, John Money, ended up he ran the gender clinic at Johns Hopkins started it in 1966. Yes. He had these extraordinary theories, and then through a series of very, very awful luck, a little boy, a twin, who had been damaged, very, very badly damaged, had lost his penis during a circumcision when he was just a little baby. The parents were frantic, didn't know what to do, brought the 2 boys to John Money at Johns Hopkins. And by the way, Johns Hopkins is not exactly a fringe institution, obviously very highly rated, highly regarded. So these lovely people, and they were sort of blue-collar workers, bring these children, these little babies, and John Money says to them, there'll be no problem here, just bring up the boy who's lost his penis, bring him up like a girl, he'll never know the difference. At the age of 14, they told the little boy who had been brought up at that point as a girl, they told him, actually, you know what happened, and they explained it to him. And his first feeling when they said that to him was absolute relief, because he knew he had never felt good. But it subsequently was discovered that John Money was sexually abusing the 2 boys, was showing them pornography, was forcing them to have sexual relations with each other. Horrific details that are well known, by the way. There's been a number of documentaries made about it. Oprah Winfrey did it. This is not a hidden story, the John Money story, but it's funny how it's suddenly kind of gone away. And as we commented recently, the New York Times did a very, 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 very expensive podcast, 6-part podcast about the origins.
2 years of research.
2 years of work, apparently, and about 25 people working on it. A 6-part podcast in which they managed to about the origins, by the way, of the trans movement. They never managed to mention the existence of John Money, who is obviously an incredibly significant figure in a bad way. And interestingly, I just went on the website of this New Zealand museum, which is in a small town, by the way, in the South Island. And they don't have, they say John Money was a research fellow at Johns Hopkins for more than 50 years, but retired and whatever. They fail to mention that his career ended in disgrace, that the actual gender clinic was closed because of the abuses that he had perpetrated on particularly these 2 children. And it's the saddest, worst, most nightmarish story you will ever read. It's horrific. And I do think perhaps, and by the way, it's kind of nice to know that people are listening to us in New Zealand. And I would say to whoever that gentleman or that lady who wrote to us, I think you should bring it to a conscious level to the people in the area of Gore, New Zealand. Let them know. And I think, I don't see why they wouldn't be able to at least remove the name from, or do the thing that people do, where they say, by the way, this is John Money, by the way, who...
They're removing statues from people who had nothing to do with slavery, who may have, traded with someone who was involved in slavery or may not. They're removing names from libraries of people. Ireland removed names of libraries. They're tearing down statues all over the world, and they've got this art gallery in
New Zealand.
To this guy who who.
But I think it's. I mean, I think it's unfortunate that people are walking into that gallery, seeing his name, and not being informed of the true story of John Money, because he will go down in history. His infamy will long outlive that gallery, by the way, of what he did. And when people eventually learn the true horrors of this trans madness, he will be remembered. He will be remembered and will have his correct place in history. And it isn't to be lauded at a museum in New Zealand.
Can I just add one thing?
You can add. It's our podcast, so you're allowed to do that, Phelim. What would you like to add?
I missed a paragraph from the advice column.
Right.
Yes. She ended it by saying,
not only should the husband go into therapy for having a different political opinion than his wife,
it may not work.
Oh, the therapy may not work.
Yeah. However, there may also come a time when nothing can be salvaged and you need to separate.
Yeah, because you can't force him to have the same ideas that you have, and you cannot tolerate the fact that he has a different idea.
And you have no interest in learning those ideas.
You see, so diversity is not our strength, right?
Yes.
And
actually, diversity is a weakness in your marriage.
Apparently in your marriage, you just can't tolerate diversity.
So we're going on vacation for the next 2 weeks, and
in sunny Ireland.
Maybe we'll go over to the Edinburgh Festival, maybe. And listen, we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. I hope you can manage without us when we're gone, and all the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you.